Hi, I'm horror author Paul Edwards. Today I'm reading Famous Monsters of Filmland, issue 57 from 1969. I thought you might enjoy flipping through this vintage magazine with me. Together, let's see what kinds of monster kid goodness is in here. The green slime blights the cover of Famous Monsters of Filmland, issue 57. I did a video on the movie The Green Slime, but at the time that I did the video, I had maybe 80 subscribers, and now I've got way more than that. So I think I'm going to restate some of my comments on The Green Slime when we get to that article. I do have something to say about it and why I think it could have done a lot better. But we'll get to that. Okay, so we're also going to have the original Frankenstein picture book, Monster Horror Scope. That's, you just know Forrest J. Ackerman himself wrote that. Is Your Name in the Graveyard Examiner? Hope not yet. All right, let's see what we're getting here. Ooh, this is an image from The Werewolf of London, although it looks to me like a publicity still, not actually a frame of film from the movie. But that certainly is Henry Hull in the Werewolf of London makeup, and Warner Oland playing the other werewolf, the one who bit him, locked in mortal combat over that weird flower that only blossoms in moonlight that gives them a respite from the werewolf curse. Inside Ackerman. Here's our hero, Forrest J. Ackerman, our editor-in-chief. And, of course, in the Fang mail, we get letters with people trying to get their pictures printed, although it looks like only one real picture of a fan got in here, although it's continued. Maybe there's more later. All right, so let's see what we're going to get. Invasion of the Vampires. Ooh. The Green Slime. We know we're going to get that. Frankenstein. Feature Film Book Part 2. The Scream Test. Oh, boy. All right. Oh, yeah. Here's a couple more readers who got their pictures published. Not in makeup, though. I prefer the ones where the kids put on makeup. You know, do up their own monster disguises and get their picture in that way. Make no mistake, there's a stake in Chris Lee's future. All right, now we all know this is a Hammer Dracula film because it's got Christopher Lee playing Dracula. But do you know which Hammer Dracula movie? It's Dracula Has Risen from the Grave. And this character here, I happen to remember this. His name is Paul. Of course, my name is Paul, so it would stick out to me. But there's a weird thing going in the Hammer Dracula movies. Probably nobody who isn't named Paul would even notice this, but almost every Hammer Dracula movie has a character named Paul. And it's a different character. They just keep reusing the name. Maybe they're trying to tell me something. I don't know. Dracula Has Risen from the Grave. Yep. I think probably everybody's favorite Hammer Dracula movie is Horror of Dracula. But if you set that one aside, my favorite one from the series is this one, Dracula Has Risen from the Grave. I know most people's, it's Dracula, Prince of Darkness, and I understand why. But I've always been partial to this one. Whoa. Invasion of the Vampires. Yep. There was a series of Mexican vampire films made in the late 50s into the 1960s. They've been dubbed into English, and they're very gothic, so they're absolutely worth watching for monster kids. I think a lot of monster kids just aren't aware that they even exist, but Invasion of the Vampires is a good one. The Bloody Vampire, The Vampire's Coffin. This is the first Mexican vampire movie that I ever saw, The Vampire's Coffin. That's what made me aware that these things existed. They're really gothic. They really have a good creepy atmosphere. Whoa. Oh my gosh. That's a pretty good picture. Come on, look at that. That's a pretty good picture. Okay. So here's the deal with the green slime. There were a couple of guys who made a series of science fiction movies that were set on a space station. And they left the movie company that they were with, and they wanted to do another movie set on a space station, but they didn't have the rights anymore to the first space station. So they simply changed the name of the space station and made this like an unofficial sequel to the movies they had already made. So basically what happens in The Green Slime is that a huge asteroid is headed for the Earth. So the space station personnel have to fly to the asteroid, plant bombs, and blow it up, which they do. Great. Except when they are walking around on the asteroid, they get infected with the green slime. And they track it back with them, like tracking mud into the house. They track it back with them into the space station. And it grows into a bug-eyed monster. And they find that if you shoot the bug-eyed monsters and its blood comes out, that blood will regenerate into a separate bug-eyed monster. So now you've got two. And they continue to multiply in that way. And next thing you know, you have an onslaught of a horde of green slime monsters on this space station. And shooting them or cutting them really is not a good idea because you'll just create more and more of them. So this is really the kind of science fiction movie that would have been successful in the 1950s or even earlier in the 1960s. You know, it's like a wild ray gun shooting, battle of man versus bug-eyed monster. That kind of science fiction. The problem is that this came out in 1968. And earlier in 1968, two movies came out which completely changed what audiences expected from science fiction. Planet of the Apes and 2001: A Space Odyssey. They both came out in the spring of 1968. Each one of them together took a much more cerebral approach to science fiction than the, shooting laser guns at little green men type of science fiction. Together, 2001 and Planet of the Apes entirely changed what audiences expected from a science fiction film. So when this film hit theaters later in 1968, it felt dated. It felt like a relic. And it was not enjoyed by audiences. Critics didn't like it. People wanted their science fiction to be brainier. And this certainly was not brainy. This was a midnight movie if there ever was one. So it often gets maligned as being a terrible movie. And as far as bug-eyed monster movies go, it's not. It's really not a terrible movie. The effects in this are better than the effects in some bug-eyed monster movies that I could name. The problem is that this whole kind of movie had become passé. So audiences didn't like it, critics didn't like it, and it got a terrible reputation when it's really not terrible. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's a good movie. This is not a quality motion picture, but as far as monster movies go, this is, perfectly good. The monsters were all right. They really were. I know people laugh at them. They're pretty creepy, especially if you're a kid. Ooh, Monster Con. Oh no. Oh no. Not bad monster jokes. Oh no. Should I subject you to one of these? All right, let's try one. Why did Dracula leave Philadelphia in such a hurry? Because it was a one-hearse town. Where do vampires get their mail? At the dead letter office. Do monsters really do all the terrible things you see in the movies? No. Quite often they use a stuntman. Oh boy. All right, one more. Okay. What does the Invisible Man... Oh, when does the Invisible Man usually disappear? When the waiter arrives with the check. I wonder if that's a premonition of the restaurant scene in the 2020 Invisible Man, where he was there in the restaurant to hideous effect. All right, you can read your monster horror scope. I can't believe they passed up a chance to make monster movie jokes about the zodiac signs. Like you could have said the Gemini twins of evil, from the movie Twins of Evil. Or you could have said Cancer the crab monster, from Attack of the Crab Monsters. But maybe it would be hard to do that for the whole 12 zodiac signs. Ooh, wait a minute. Let's make sure I'm not missing anything here. Like investing in a ghoul mine. Okay, 40. The Undying Monster, Frankenstein. This image of the Frankenstein monster comes from a movie poster that publicized the monster. This picture is actually kind of interesting because if you look closely, this is not the way Boris Karloff looked when he played the Frankenstein monster in the final finished film. These things here were originally an idea that Jack Pierce had for the monster, these metal bolts, and he decided it was too much, so they wound up taking those bolts out and just went with the electrodes in the neck. But it's interesting to see an alternative version of the Universal Frankenstein monster. Poor Dr. Waldman. I like the scene in the 1931 Frankenstein where he's getting ready to destroy the monster, and he has no idea that the monster has actually woken up and is just waiting for his chance to reach over and grab him from the slab. And here we have the brutish assistant played by Dwight Frye, but his name is not Igor, it's Fritz. Igor only came along when they made the third film, and then they pretended he had been there the whole time. This scene where Frankenstein's monster makes friends with the little girl, and then he's trying to just play with her because she's throwing daisy heads into the lake, and he does the same, and then he doesn't understand the difference, and he ends up throwing her into the lake and she drowns. That scene where he actually tosses her into the water was edited out of a lot of releases, and it was only restored relatively recently, like I think it might have been in the 1980s, but somewhat recently. So it's back in now. If you were to buy Frankenstein on DVD or something, it's in there now. But a lot of people who saw Frankenstein in the theater did not see that scene. they saw up to this point, and then it just cut to something else. And then we were just told what happened to the girl. It's interesting because Boris Karloff wanted to just sort of gently set the girl down in the water. And James Whale, the director, wanted him to like throw her overhand bodily out into the water. So they compromised. So what happens is that Boris Karloff threw her underhand, just sort of tossed her into the water. Scoop, never before seen scene of the death of Fritz. Yeah. Now, one thing that I have loved about the movie Frankenstein is that James Whale had a real eye for filling the screen top to bottom. So he had these sets that, it's not just the characters here and then a blank wall. There's something all the way up to the top edge of the screen in a whole lot of shots. Makes good use of the space given to him. Oh, in fact, here is the movie poster I was talking about earlier. The original horror show. Good look at the makeup. One thing, and this is the slightest little complaint, but the backdrop in this scene is distracting because it's wrinkled. There's nothing wrong with using a backdrop, but this one they should have stretched it out a bit to get the wrinkles out of it. That is something I always notice every time I see this movie, and believe me, I've seen this movie a lot of times. But that's the tiniest little nitpick in probably my favorite horror movie of all. So, it's just that I've seen it so many times that I've started to notice it. I was watching a different Karloff movie recently. It was The Black Cat, where he co-starred with Bela Lugosi. And it was just a couple of years after he had done Frankenstein. And his character was hurt, and he let out a growl. This is Karloff's character, let out a growl that was just like his Frankenstein monster growl. Sounds sort of like an outboard motor. And I'm like, hey, that sounded a little too much like your Frankenstein. Oh, got some Monster Comics. If you're familiar with any of these artists, let us know. Oh gosh. Lon Chaney Sr. portrayed in the comic as being on screen. Oh yeah, and a scene from his Hunchback of Notre Dame. It's kind of meta. And from his Phantom of the Opera. Oh. So it's a case of life imitating art. Is that it? Because she pulls the mask off this character just like Mary Philbin pulled the mask off the Phantom in the movie. Oh, I've never seen this before. The Land of the Giants Space Shuttle. I've never seen that before. I mean the model I've never seen before. Oh, and a model of the Fantastic Voyage ship. I know for a fact I've never seen that before. But when I see Dr. Evil of Captain Action, I'm immediately thinking of a completely different Dr. Evil, Austin Powers' archenemy. Right. Monster, 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 Brigitte Bardot. Oh my gosh. This was a mystery photo from last month's issue. Do you know what monster actor this is? And the answer is Boris Karloff. You asked for him. Our regular You Asked For department this issue is devoted entirely to Boris Karloff. There he is as Dr. Neiman in House of Frankenstein. He's in The Strange Door. This is when he played that devil cult leader in The Black Cat. The Climax. Bedlam Madhouse. I'm not too sure I'm familiar with that one. The Body Snatcher. Of course, Bride of Frankenstein. Chamber of Horrors. Shooting title of Bedlam. Okay. Here's a little trivia for you. So if you've seen The Black Cat, you know that there's a scene where Boris Karloff is leading the devil worship cult in their evil prayers, and he's saying things in Latin, but he keeps saying a certain phrase over and over, and it's the Latin words for a grain of salt. And it's because it was a joke for anybody in the audience that knew Latin. It was saying to take it with a grain of salt. The Batman of Africa. Wow. The Mysterious Dr. Satan was a movie serial. I should do a video just on that. Get your monster and ghost paperbacks. Just the other day, I was seeing, for the first time, I saw the Color Out of Space movie from, I think it was from 2020, with Nicolas Cage playing the Naum Whitley character. Oh my gosh. As usual, of course, Cage was totally over the top. And yes, I have read The Color Out of Space. I know my Lovecraft, believe me. I'm up on my Lovecraft. I am not up on my Prince Valiant. I never got into that. But you can't do everything. Barnabas. Is it Barnabas, the Christian heavy metal band from the 1980s? No. It's the other Barnabas, Barnabas Collins, the protagonist of Dark Shadows, the horror soap opera that ran for 5 years in the early 1970s. Listen, if you enjoy classic monsters and vintage horror, check out my book series, the Mourner's Woods books. I write novels for people who like monster movies. I've set a series of novels in a haunted forest called Mourner's Woods. Each book brings a completely new cast of characters into this forbidden wilderness in the American Northwest, where they encounter different monsters and fiends in each story. I recapture the vibe and the feel of 20th century B movies, but in a contemporary setting. My name again is Paul Edwards. My books are the Mourner's Woods books. They're for sale on Amazon, and I'll put a link in the description on this video. Thanks for spending some time looking through Famous Monsters of Filmland issue 57 with me. I'll see you in Mourner's Woods.